the real battle wasn't against the Sahara. The real battle was people's mindsets, because they're hungry, often hungry, they're poor, and here's this nutty white guy telling us we should plant trees. It didn't add up for them. Everybody, in terms of climate change, everybody can turn the light switch off when they leave the room. Everybody can do small things. I think I'll
All
start
right.
regreening Mars next.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Food Forest podcast. Today with us we have Tony Rinaudo, and for me, he's really one of my personal heroes. He hasn't won a Nobel Prize yet, but he did win a Right Livelihood Award, which is called the Alternative Nobel. Why? Because he is one of the biggest desert regreeners, the biggest tree planters out there, restoring more than 200 million trees in different parts of the world. Tony, welcome. How are you doing?
Thank you, Lewis. Very, very good. Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You are called forest maker and FMNR pioneer. Can you tell me what FMNR, or Farmer Managed Natural Regeneration, is?
Certainly. So, across vast areas of the earth that were once forested, in many cases, there's this remnant. I like to call it an underground forest. Even though you can't see the trees, it's still existing in the form of living tree stumps, sometimes roots with the ability to sprout, often dormant seeds. And the method is simply to find and select those that you want to regrow. In some cases, there'll be a mass of stems coming up from the one stump. And so we reduce that competition and leave one, or preferably up to 5 stems, because people are using these stems. And if you only leave one, you're back to zero again. So thin out the stems, prune some of the lower branches, protect that growth from threats such as fire, roaming livestock, or cutting, and monitor the growth. Maybe you need to come back from time to time. There's new suckers, new shoots that need pruning. Importantly, in the context that I work in developing countries, it's very, very important to allow people the right to sustainably manage and utilize that regrowth. Otherwise, if they don't have that incentive, they won't do it in the first place. So very, very simple method.
Yeah. So is it like coppicing?
Exactly. So it's actually, there's nothing new to this. It's another permutation of coppicing, and in some cases pollarding, managing that regrowth.
Yeah. And what's the big difference between coppicing and the method you described? Or
So
is it similar?
as a technical practice, it's very, very similar. It's managing that regrowth that comes up from the stump, but because it's farmer managed, or in some cases community managed, they will shape that to meet their particular needs. Very often it's done on farmlands, and so they'll be very concerned not to have too much shading and competition with their crops, and they'll prune it and select the species in a certain way to achieve their objectives. We can also do this in degraded forest land, and in that case you might leave every species that comes up, and in time you would prune it in such a way that eventually, if it's correct for that species, eventually you would be producing a single stemmed tree. But it's basically a type of coppicing.
But what I also really find interesting, it's farmer managed natural regeneration. Often when nature regenerators think about regenerating land, they see farmers as the enemy, because they're sometimes like have opposing goals as nature regenerators, but you combine both. You see farmers as the solution.
Definitely, and it's critically important when you think of the millions, perhaps billions of hectares of land under agriculture. And in many, many cases, these are virtual deserts. They're monocultures, they're fallow for much of the year. And there are more than 500 million smallholder farmers in the world. They're not the problem. If we can influence their mindset to appreciate trees as their friends, as their helpers instead of their enemies, this is an incredible opportunity for massive global level restoration. So I definitely don't see them as the enemy, they're our allies.
Yeah. And like you said before, it's like you have the farmer who also has an incentive to take care of the tree and make sure it resprouts, because with these sprouts that come back, they can use it to make to light their fires, or to use it for to make materials.
Many different things. Often the initial incentive might be, finally, I have firewood close at hand, and my wife no longer has to walk that dangerous journey 4 hours every second day. Often, and in the Niger case where I lived for 17 years, farming simply became untenable. We had wind speeds of up to 70 kilometers per hour, soil
Wow.
surface temperatures of 60 degrees Celsius, plummeting organic matter levels. Trees were actually essential for sustainable, viable agriculture, and farmers quickly realized this.
Yeah. And you talk about this underground forest. Is it really present everywhere?
I wouldn't say everywhere, but it's present in a surprisingly vast area of the world. So if you consider the areas that were once forested, it's very likely that there's some remnant of that forest in the form of living stumps or dormant seeds, particularly in the drier and even arid regions. It's much more likely there. In the more humid and more highly cultivated areas, it could be actually the farmers really were very thorough. They removed all the stumps and there's no
Hmm.
more seeds. But FMNR is about more than simple coppicing. It's about changing mindsets. And if people's behaviors change, whether they cultivate the whole surface, whether they burn, whether they overgraze and trample everything, if those behaviors are changed, if there's a remnant forest anywhere within proximity of that landscape, nature itself will begin to fill the gap. Wind,
Yeah.
water, animals, birds will bring the seeds in because behaviors have changed. When those seeds arrive, they now have the opportunity to germinate and grow.
Yeah. Nature doesn't like voids.
Exactly.
Tony, you grew up on a farm in rural Australia. What early memories shaped your sense of connection to the land, and where do you think like the key experiences as a kid planted the seed to do what you're doing today? And how did you grow from being a rural kid to like one of the greatest regenerators on this planet?
So I must have been a strange child. I remember every Sunday we would travel to the nearby town where my grandparents lived. And I absolutely loved trees. I don't know where that came from. And close to my town, the trees would come right up to the edge of the road and they almost form a living cave. The branches above the car would all touch. And then you came to a certain point in that landscape and the country opened up and the farmers had cleared the land. And bang, this bald hill in the distance would hit me in the eyes, Mamungi Ranges. And I was just a little boy, but I was thinking, why did the farmers take every single tree off? Can't they see the erosion gullies and the animals in the hot sun? And in my
You're thinking that
mind's
as a kid
eye,
already.
as a kid, and in my mind's eye, I was in my gumboots, I had a shovel in my hand, and I was on those bare hills planting trees. And
Ah.
my home area was also an area of intense commercial forestry. So I was very upset that the native bushland was being bulldozed on steep hills. There would be many years before that was replanted to a monoculture, which was really a green desert. So I didn't have an understanding of ecology, but there was something very wrong with that
You
picture.
could feel it.
I could feel it and I could see it. The mountain streams being silted up, the biodiversity loss. So I was angry. Fortunately, quite by serendipitously, I came across two books by a guy called Richard St. Barbie Baker. And he was a self-proclaimed international forester and conservationist. And he traveled the world promoting the preservation of important sites like the redwoods in California and other places, but also promoting sustainable forestry. And in reading his story, I thought, oh, that's wonderful. Maybe I could do something along those lines. It had a big impact on me.
Yeah, it's amazing how you can be influenced by just a person leading the example. Like you see, okay, well, if this guy if Richard can do it, why couldn't I do it? And then you proved to the world that you could indeed do it,
And
went on.
interestingly, Lewis, one of the books was called Sahara Conquest, and he did this big road trip through the heart of the Sahara. And he came out through Niger, not too far from where I ended up living. But his observations and his commentary on how desertification was impacting the lives of people had a very powerful impact on me.
Yeah. So it's really you're taking over his journey, kind of. What a nice coming together of coincidence, let's say. Or not a
Yes, and
coincidence, who
I
knows?
never met him personally, but I've watched videos and listened to tapes and certainly read his books.
Yeah. Oh, that's just amazing. So when you started as a young Tony, I don't know how old you are right now, if I may ask.
68.
And how can people like imagine how much land you regenerated throughout your life? Like how much
Well,
hectares? Do you know that?
firstly, I want to say it's the farmers and communities themselves, and many colleagues and employees that have done the bulk of the work. But in Niger alone, an estimated 6 million hectares, and
That's
now
crazy.
working through World Vision, and we work in 100 countries and doing everything that we can to freely share the information. And I'll send you a link to the website that you can share with
Oh
your
yeah,
audience.
I'm gonna put it in the show notes. Yeah.
Wonderful. So at the moment, we don't have an exact number. We know it's in excess of 1 million hectares directly through World Vision, but actually, it's much more than that because FMNR is not the same as planting a tree and you can geolocate that tree and come back and visit. You're planting an idea, and it's
Yeah.
like yeah, feathers in the wind. It goes wherever people hear it, and because it doesn't require a lot of money or technology, they just practice it. So it could be many multiples more than that million or so directly from World Vision.
Yeah, you just can't measure that, but yeah, that's okay. It's yeah, it's just people always like ask, oh, how much? They always want to see like
Yeah.
numbers, but it's great that it's like spreading like a I would say like a wildfire, but maybe it's
Yeah.
spreading like a forest. We have to change that sentence.
Yes, and into the future, we will be able to measure it much, much better. We have satellite technology now and apps, and you can extrapolate. So at the moment, it's quite difficult, but we expect in the near future it'll be much easier to give an estimate. So we need to catch up again in a year.
Yeah, with pleasure. Yeah, no, most definitely. So young Tony, you arrived in Africa in 1980s. What kind of person would we see? What drove you then? Was it
So I was
really?
very young. I think I was about 24 and skinny, quiet. I like to lead from behind, lead by example, but energetic and very committed to making a difference if I could.
Yeah. Okay. Really, an idealist.
Yes, naive and idealist. I was part of the backstory before we got to Niger. I mentioned the anger at seeing that deforestation, and in the notes here, you asked a question on faith. So there was that anger, but frustration that I couldn't change what I was seeing in my own district, but also I was aware in the Amazon, in Borneo, there's this massive deforestation globally, and aware too that we were privileged growing up in the West. Children just like me, born elsewhere, weren't so lucky, going to bed hungry. And so the injustice really cut away at me. And the faith element in my life, my mum set a great example, and it gave a framework for living that there are more important things to life than accumulating lots of money, that
Mm-hmm.
we do have a duty of care for those less fortunate. And from the scriptures, from the Bible, that actually we're called to be good stewards. Yes, use the environment, benefit from it, but by no means destroy it. So that was the framework that set me on this journey. And as a boy, being powerless in a sense, I did have one power. I could say a boy's prayer, and I just simply asked, please use me somehow, somewhere to make a difference. And that, for me, that was the start of all of this.
Wow, that's a beautiful affirmation and a beautiful goal to the universe. Like, use me to do good.
Imagine what the world would be like. And I know your audience will have different faiths or no faith, but imagine if that was everybody's objective. It'd be a very different place.
Yeah, 100%. And it's like you say, it doesn't matter what religion you have, or even if you don't have a religion, it's just a way of, yeah, having a kind of red thread through your life and kind of mission statement, whether it's like you see it as something religious, or even if you're not religious at all. Like, okay, my mission statement is, okay, well, I am here to do good, and or I'm here to help nature. And once I think you know that for yourself, it's such a gift. Like, for me, I also got it like a while ago now, that it became so clear. Okay, that's what I'm here to do, and I'll try to do everything I can to do that. And then it's just, yeah, opportunities come to you, and then you say yes, of course, and then before you know it, you're on all kind of crazy adventures
Yeah. Yeah. So
and doing the
in
work.
many ways, I was the most unlikely person to be doing what I'm doing. Shy, not very adventurous. So many things in my character. But when you find your purpose, it sort of puts a bullet under you and drives you forward.
I heard that there was a pivotal moment that you were a bit, I wouldn't say depressed, but like standing on the edge of the road and like really think, okay, but how on earth are we going to do something about it? And then you had like this aha moment. Can you describe me that aha moment?
Certainly. So we'd been trying everything. There was this assumption because the landscape in Niger was virtually treeless, then automatically I must raise seedlings and plant them. And under those harsh conditions, and the attitude of people at that time simply didn't work. So after 2.5 years of hitting my head against the wall, and when you're young, you want to see change yesterday. And you're so enthusiastic, you're so convinced that you can change the world, and it just wasn't happening. And not only were the methods that I was using failing, more than 80% of the seedlings perished, the very people who had come to help called me the crazy white farmer. And so, yeah, I was at wit's end because they're hungry, often hungry, they're poor. And here's this nutty white guy telling us we should plant trees. It didn't add up for them. So I obviously was crazy. But 2.5 years in, and I'm really questioning my sense of calling and what's the purpose of me being here. And on,
Mhm.
on a certain day, I was actually delivering a vehicle load of seedlings to the villagers, knowing full well most would die. The people think it's crazy. What am I doing?
Mm.
But I also knew that unless there was some fundamental change in the way people treated the landscape and the trees, there would be ongoing and increasing hunger, displacement, conflict over scarce resources. And so I remembered that little boy's prayer. And I thought, God doesn't make mistakes. And I said another prayer for God to open our eyes, show us what to do, help us. And it's ridiculous, Lewis. We'd been practically walking on these what appear as bushes, driving
Yeah.
past them in our rush to plant trees. And on this particular day, I'd actually stopped. It was a very sandy road, and you have to reduce the air pressure, otherwise you get bogged. I'd stopped, and I said that prayer, and I saw this bush nearby, and it was like almost like it was calling me to take a closer look. And I walked over, and as soon as you look at the leaf shape of nearly any plant, it's very distinctive. It's like a person's signature. It will tell you the species. Immediately I knew that's not a bush, it's not an agricultural weed, that's a tree. And I bent over, brushed away some of the accumulated sand, and sure enough, there's a stump. It's a tree that had been cut down, and it's re-sprouting from the base. And instantly, I'm not fighting the Sahara Desert or climate change. I don't need a miracle species or a multi-million-dollar budget. Everything that I need was literally at my feet. There were millions of these, what seemed like bushes, across that landscape. Millions. This was the solution that I'd been looking for and the answer to my prayer. So it fundamentally shifted my thinking from this deforestation is a technical problem. If I had the right species or method or timing, so a very Western way of approaching
Yeah, very
problem solving.
rational. Yeah.
Yep. And to this day, it's the way a lot of approaches to land restoration are taken. It shifted my thinking. No, this is a social problem. If people's false beliefs about the value of trees and nature in general had pushed them to have such negative attitudes, such destructive practices to want to clear every single tree. The real battle wasn't against the Sahara. The real battle was people's mindsets. And so to this day, from that point, 95% of what I do is not regreen landscapes directly. I'm in the business of regreening mindscapes. And if I can turn virtually enemies of trees, people who cut them, burn them, slash them, if I can turn enemies of trees into friends of trees, the rest is easy because nature is willing and waiting. It's present, waiting for the opportunity to express itself. But we keep burning, trampling, ploughing, destroying.
Wow, that's just amazing, and I think it's also written down in the Bible somewhere. I've never read it. I'm sorry for that, but there's something like "Ask and you shall receive." That's exactly what happened, right?
Yes.
You were in contact with maybe some higher energies, and it took you the time to observe very deeply, and then realizing that the solution is just at your feet. That's
Yeah.
just incredible. And I often say, for example, my personal motto in life is regenerate, inspire, celebrate. And you can't do one without the other. Like, you
Mm-hmm.
can't regenerate without inspiration. And that's what you're doing, inspiring people. But the big question for me is, how on earth do you start that journey of inspiring people? So you were there, you had this incredible aha moment, this
Yeah.
revelation. Then maybe you become even more crazy because you're like, oh my God, I've seen the lights.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
This crazy
Yeah.
white farmer. What is he saying
Yeah.
now? How did he then like go from this revelation to like inspiring an entire movement?
That's a wonderful question because really everything could have failed. We decided because people thought this was nuts. They were focused on growing annual crops for food, for income, and their fear was these trees would shade their crops and they'd be even poorer. And so I got this idea. I'll ask for volunteers. And at that time, there were just 10 villages in our project. So one volunteer from each project. And I said, look, I think this will work. I think it will be beneficial. Please, would you experiment with me? Not on your whole land. People are risk averse. When you're poor, you've got everything to lose if you get it wrong. Let's do it on a small corner of your land, and we'll do it for 1 year. You teach me what you know and observe. I'll teach you the little bit that I know, but we'll learn together and we'll adjust this thing. Within just 2 months, these useless looking bushes were small trees because of the selection, thinning, pruning, protection. I said, yes, this is working. But because it's a very traditional society and people don't like change, it's a threat. Neighbors, traditional enemies, whoever came at night, they were stealing those trees. They were cutting them out of spite, doing it to see what their reaction would be. It could have failed in 1983. But that year also was a severe drought year, and there was terrible hunger afterwards. And it's a long story, but to cut it short, we orchestrated a food for work program. And I had a captive audience in a whole district, 100 villages. One of the work requirements, if you want this food, and they certainly needed it, one of the work requirements is to leave 40 trees per hectare on your farmland. They hated it. Tony's so mean. How could he expect us to do this? They were hungry. I had the food. And for that period of 6 months, so this isn't good development, but it got people over the line. It got a critical mass of people to see the benefits firsthand. At the end of the 6 to 8 months, there were more than 500,000 trees regenerated. Next harvest was excellent, so they couldn't say my trees ruined their crops. I stopped the Food for Work program and immediately 75% of the trees got cut out. Finished with Tony, we get on with our life. But 25% of the people, a critical mass, said, no, did you notice? The soil was darker and more moist at the base of these trees. Do you remember when we were kids, we loved the fruit of this one? And that one, Dad said, is always good for fodder or fertilizer. The memory started to kick in. From that core critical mass, year on year, it spread and spread and spread until it reached in Niger after 20 years, 5 million hectares, 200 million trees. Now, what do we do today? We don't pray for famine. It's not good development, and you don't want to see people suffer. I run workshops, and it's very important, first of all, not to blame or shame. That doesn't work in our society, and it doesn't work there. It doesn't work if I tell people what to do. Look, this is a wonderful solution you need. Do it. It doesn't work. So I ask questions. It's very important for people to draw their own conclusions. And I call it the past, present, future exercise. What was the environment like when you were a child? How did it provide for you? And honestly, they paint for me a picture of the Garden of Eden.
Oh, wow.
Fertile soil, fewer wood close at hand. There was still wildlife, springs of water, on and on and on. Second question, what's it like today? Mr. Tony, it's terrible. It's the opposite. It's the opposite of Garden of Eden. The third question, something powerful happens in the workshop. Now, you're there together with your peers and you've got this life experience of this deteriorating landscape. Third question, if we continue business as usual, destroying the environment, what does the future hold for your children? It's a devastating question. And
Wow.
they're
Powerful.
talking with their closest friends that they're sitting with, and the responses are terrible. It will be hell on earth. It's already bad. It will be hell. We will have to leave our inheritance, our land, and go to the capital city. It's frightening.
Mm.
And I've really, really got their attention. And I said, that's terrible. Nobody wants to go there. And I tell the story of the transformation and how crop yields doubled, women collecting fuel wood close at hand, water tables restored, fodder for the animals, and so on and so forth. Would you come on a journey with me? Not on the whole land in the first year. We'll experiment together. If you like it after 1 year, good and well, you can continue and expand it. If not, heaven forbid, it's your land, your trees, cut them out. I only need a year. And usually there's this little debate you always have in an audience, the pessimists and the optimists. And the pessimists say, oh,
Yeah.
Tony doesn't know our condition. Those people over there always light
It's
fires. And
different
these
over
ones have got,
here.
yeah. So I let them have it out. And the optimists will say, well, what's there to lose on a small corner of our land for 1 year? Let's give it a go. 99% of the time, the optimists win. And I only need that year. This thing, so simple, yet so powerful to transform landscapes, that within a year you've got a captive audience without famine.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's good that you can do it without the famine.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the things that I'm wondering, so are you also doing the dream exercise? Well, what would you want the future to look like if you could sketch it out? Have you ever done that with people?
So I'm not familiar with that term, but
So how do an ideal future scenario look like? Because I think everybody wants to live in an Eden, right?
yeah. So there's certainly a version of that. We then, if they accept to try it, we then create a community plan. You know, what are the potential threats? How do we deal with them? And what would you like to see? Yeah, yes, we do a form of that. And again, very powerful stuff.
Yeah, yeah. It's incredible, just the power of imagining. And just the other day, we had a psychologist also on the show about climate psychology, and he said, well, you have to put people on a chair and imagine that the person on the chair is like in a time machine, and and you can say, okay, go back to do a time to check how that time was. And if that time was any better than today, if yes, what was better, what was worse, and like what can you learn from them? So all these imagining exercises really literally makes you thinking, but also feeling.
And
And yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I think gives a spark of hope. People are really depressed. People feel they've failed and hopeless. When you start imagining a better future, something kicks in. Yeah.
Yeah,
And one of the beauties, like we're only talking about FMNR, there are many different interventions you can bring into a community, but something about the simplicity, the early benefits, the visual transformation, something about that is very powerful, and it feeds that initial spark. And people get more courageous. People start to think, well, I succeeded in that. I'm going to try maybe small scale irrigation or this new variety. It brings other changes along with it.
yeah. It's like these quick wins. Yeah. So we're also regenerating land on a very much smaller scale than you are, unfortunately, still yet, Stony. So we're still young and naive, let's say. And
Don't knock it. It's a virtue, actually.
thank you. And it's an exercise we do with the people whose land we're helping to regenerate. Is like always like the lottery exercise. Imagine you would win $100 million, for example. What would you do? And then they sketch out all these crazy ideas and then say, okay, let's do a reality check. How much dollars do you actually have? And then say, okay, but what can we do? And oftentimes you can do so much to create this crazy vision with very little budget. It's often more imagination that you need than money, but just to think in an unlimited headspace, it's good to do this exercise. And then when you start on implementing it, you start with small things, and it's like people with low self-esteem, if they do a very small thing and they acknowledge that it worked, like, okay, wow, this small thing worked. Maybe now I can do something bigger. Maybe instead of like planting some strawberry plants, I can now plant some raspberry plants. Okay, and that also worked. Fantastic. Victory, celebrate. And then a bigger tree. And then before you knew it, they regenerated their entire land.
Yeah, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah. Most definitely. You've written The Forest Underground. You have been featured in the film The Forest Maker. How did it feel for you to have your life turned into a story? Do you feel you've been misunderstood, or do you think it's like a perfect version of what you've been doing?
So nothing's ever perfect, and initially didn't have any intention of writing a book. I didn't think there was enough story, but during lockdown I couldn't travel, and I was so influenced by books myself. I thought, at this stage of life, I can't do that original hands-on field stuff living in the country. And others are now managing projects and sort of beyond that too. The most important thing would be to do something that inspires the next generation and gives hope. So that's why I wrote the story, not to get more fame or how good's Tony, but to get the story out there. And it was actually, while it's always a task to write something, it was actually a real joy. This is a story of hope for a world that's desperately starved of hope. So that was the intention behind it. With the documentary, I think if there was one thing that I could alter or enhance on it, sometimes I've been accused of being the white savior, and I'm far from that. And from the documentary, I would highlight much, much more the role of the farmers, my employees, and more recently through World Vision, my colleagues who've gone much further, much faster than I did, and much of the credit goes to them. So that's the thing that I would play up much, much more. But for me, both the doco and the book, they've been tools for getting this rather obscure, rather unknown method out to the world. They've both been very, very powerful at doing that.
Yeah. Did this visibility globally change the way you would be able to work? Do you think that because of this visibility, you became more successful in, let's say, convincing people to do something or to achieve results? Do you think it sped up the regeneration process?
Definitely gave it an extra level of credibility. And in addition, there's a number of awards, but particularly you mentioned the Right Livelihood Award. To receive a prestigious award, firstly, it creates awareness that wasn't there previously. Secondly, it creates credibility. It's not just Tony banging his own drum. These are high-profile people that selected him for that award, and it's flung doors open. EU, UN, other NGOs, my own organisation, all of a sudden, this is this incredible, powerful tool, and I can trace a significant uptick in adoption and awareness and donations since 2018.
That's nice. So we need spreading of the word and the seeds planted in as many heads as possible.
Yes, and it's like broadcasting seed. You don't know which ones will germinate and where they'll germinate, but doing podcasts, it's amazing. Years later, you might find out it influenced somebody in Albania or wherever. And on their own level, at their own scale, they've been doing this, but, world. So it's very powerful once the information is out there where it can go.
Yeah. Yeah, it is crazy. And it's just like you reading the book of Richard St. Barb Baker. Yeah, if people don't know that Tony Rinaudo is going around the world doing what he's doing, they can be inspired by you. So it's important that these words spread. Despite this international acclaim, you still seem very grounded in humility. What keeps your ego in check? Is it faith, community, daily habits?
Certainly all of those things. I think that recognition that for 2.5 years I didn't have a clue. And the solution really was, for me personally, it was an answer to prayer. So I can't claim the credit on that one. But secondly, what I already mentioned, the vast bulk of the work, the millions of hectares, the blood, sweat and tears, often facing opposition, much of that was faced by farmers, by my staff, by colleagues. So if I boast, I'm boasting on their behalf. Look at what we've done. Look at what all of us have done. So I don't feel I have a claim to get a big head.
Yeah. Okay, that's good, because otherwise that could be counterproductive.
Well, who wants to listen to a bragger anyway?
No, definitely. Before we're gonna end this podcast, I'm wondering, how do you see the world look like in 10 years from now, if we do the work or if we not do the work, and do you think we will do the work?
I'm very, very encouraged. World Vision's being very intentional about promoting FMNR in our own programs and then freely sharing it with anybody and everybody. And I'll share that link to the website. There's a free online training course, self-led online training course. There are manuals in English, French, Spanish,
Okay.
and Burmese. All the time we're building our capacity to help others to adopt this. When you look at the world, and it depends on which reference you go to, there's anything between 1 and 3 billion hectares of degraded land, and a good chunk of that has some level of capacity for regeneration through FMNR. So going forward, and with these initiatives, with greater awareness on the web and other media outlets, I see a much greener future. People more aware and working with nature instead of fighting it. And then all the trickle-on effects, greater food security, less displacement, less resource-based conflict, more children in school that are healthier, better fed, and that beam, they've got hope for the future. They've got a bright future in mind, not a dismal future. That's the preferred vision that I have, and we're working very, very hard to see the reality. The opposite is unimaginable, and I don't want to dwell on that. Otherwise you get depressed and you become inert, inactive. And I think the best is to take action. Now, people say, but Tony, I'm just an individual. I don't have any money. I don't have a lot of... Don't believe that for a minute. Everybody, in terms of climate change, everybody can turn the light switch off when they leave the room. Everybody can do small things. And what I've learned in my experience, I started small, 10 villages, but it must be a universal principle, I think. With an incremental increase in effort, there's an exponential increase in impact. I started with 10. In 1983, through famine relief, we had 100. Following that experience, we initiated exchange visits. NGOs, faith-based groups, government, anybody, come, spend a day with my farmers. And we sent our farmers and our staff to the four corners of Niger. Took 20 years, but after 20 years, there were 5 million hectares, 200 million trees. 1999, I joined World Vision. I thought, wonderful. This organization works in 100 countries. What can we do? And in 2012, we had a joint international conference with the World Agroforestry Center, what was then the Evergreen Agriculture Partnership in Nairobi. And it put FMNR on the map. And today, it's been introduced at least into 40 countries. So just to repeat it, an incremental increase in effort. Start small. We all start small. Gives an exponential increase in impact.
Yeah, it's like how can you make a thing in your life better only with 1% every day? With all these 1%, it adds up, and before you know it, you're Superman.
Yeah.
Or just doing some impact.
Yeah. And, the news out there is bad. It's depressing. If that's our focus, that's our world. The antidote is to do something about it within your capacity and then build on that.
Yeah. And so if in moments where you feel climate despair or despair of ecological collapse or maybe signs of burnouts, that's what you do. You turn to action and to faith, probably.
Yeah.
Some combination of those.
Yes, definitely. So if I take an example of Niger, if you were a strategist and you wanted to have a global impact, Niger is the last place on earth you would pick to do a significant ecological work. Edge of the Sahara Desert, very harsh climate, one of the poorest countries in the world, working with poor, mostly illiterate, risk-averse farmers. You wouldn't go there. But look at what they've changed there. And I think in the least likely place, maybe that's the most likely place for a miracle. So I get inspiration. If they can do that there, what's our excuse in the West with our wealth and knowledge and contacts? We can do much, much more if we're unleashed to do that. There was a day before that discovery of the underground forest. Again, I was driving to the villages and I came across this area. It had become compacted. The trees were gone and it was lateritic soils. With exposure to the elements, it actually turns to rock. And I got out of the car and I thought, this is hopeless. How many $1 million? How many decades? How many hundreds of staff? And in disgust, I swiveled around to get back into the car. But as I did, a little crack in the ground. The seed was germinating through this rock. And that morning, you mentioned faith again. That morning, I read a little bit from the Bible every day. And there was a scripture in the Psalms that said, when your spirit moves over the face of the earth, you renew the face of the earth. And I realized a lot of Christians are fixated that God's only concerned about saving the lost and healing broken humanity. Yes, good and well. But in that moment, I realized God's equally invested in restoring and renewing the face of his creation. He loves creation much more than we do. And it's like it lifted this great weight off my shoulders that I had a pretty powerful ally that could give inspiration and perseverance and insight and strength to know what to do.
Beautiful. And what would you tell somebody who's really lacking of faith right now and like lost faith and don't even believe in faith anymore, no matter what religion or non-religion they have?
Well, yeah, I'm not sure of the answer, but I think don't give up. I mean, the fact that we're alive is a miracle, whether you believe in a God or not. The complexity of the human body and the complexity, diversity, and beauty of the earth. Hold on to the things that you can see. Don't worry about the things you can't see yet. That'll come if you're on this journey. But the very things that you see are cause for hope. And ask yourself the question, do you want to be part of that and contribute to it? Or do you want to be separate and detract from it? And I would hope even a person without faith but wanting to live a better life, I would hope they would choose the former and just go from there. Yeah, just go from there. Life unfolds. As you said, one thing leads to another, and the powers of the universe come to you when you're on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah, it's yeah, and that's really true. Once you start on a journey and kind of know where you're going, it's crazy how many allies you find or how many nice coincidences that come on the journey. Yeah, it's and I like Joseph Campbell a lot, who wrote the book A Hero with a Thousand Faces, who wrote about the hero's journey. And he said he studied all religions across the world and cultures and traditions, and he says that it all comes down to following your bliss, and that once you follow your bliss, you kind of become magnetic. People just like kind of feel that you're radiating that. All right, oh my God, Tony is like doing this amazing work. I want to join him. How can I help him? Let's just tell me what I have to do and I'll do it. You know, that kind of. All right, mission. We're going for it. We know where we're going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
All
another
right.
wonderful book that had a big impact on me, and it was written by a Christian pastor, but it's not preachy. The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale. And a lot of parallels with that book that you just mentioned, where you start on that journey and the forces of the universe are with you. And the power of the mind and having a positive attitude can make so much difference.
Yeah. All right. I see we have our next guest already, Tiago Barbosa. Welcome. We're just gonna finish this episode here with Tony. Don't know if you know each other. Tiago, this is
No.
Tony. Tony, this is Tiago.
Hi, Tiago. Good to meet you.
Sorry, I jumped the gun. Sorry. I'll see you guys soon. I'll
Don't
come back
worry.
soon.
No, no, no. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. We're just wrapping up here. I was just about to ask Tony the last question. if you would have a magic wand, Tony, and you could really do anything you want with it, what would you do?
Well, I've been on this journey so long, it would have to have something to do with regreening the earth. I guess if I had a magic stick, I would bring before people this vision of what they could do to create a better world. Working with nature instead of against it is so much easier in the long run and so much more beneficial than fighting it and destroying it. So my magic wand would be to influence people to take stock of the journey they're on, ask if we continue business as usual, destroying this precious earth, what does the future hold for our children? And then hopefully point them in a direction that's so much better, greener, more fulfilling, more equitable, finding your bliss in a wonderful world as I think it was meant to be.
Beautiful, beautiful. I can only agree to that. And it literally comes back to, are we going to fight against nature or work together with it? And it's stupid to fight against nature because we're like more than half of our cells in our own body are not even human cells. It is nature. We are nature. And so fighting against nature is literally fighting against yourself. Well, Tony, I'm really, really grateful that you were able to join us for the Food Forest podcast. Really enjoyed talking to you. And the things that really stayed with me is how can you look at the landscape and use gratefulness, search for gratefulness for what's already there, because that's what you did. You said, okay, well, first you think about finding gazillions of dollars to maybe have machines to do something with the land or special species, look for miracle solutions. But what we often don't realize is that the miracle is right in front of our eyes. And we're so busy that we don't realize that, oh my God, the miracle is already here. But if we don't open our eyes, then it's like a dog that wants to lick in your face. It's standing in front of you.
Very problematic if you already have the solution in mind before you understand the problem. And I think with the approach that I took initially, I knew what the solution was. I thought I knew what the solution was. It didn't work. The solution was at our feet.
Yeah, so that's... and the only way to do that is to go to a humble place in yourself and know, okay, maybe I don't know the answer. Let's observe. And observation is everything. Fantastic.
Yeah. It goes against the grain a lot. Our whole education and what it means to be an adult in this society, it's all about knowing the answers. But no, it's very powerful actually to not know the answer and to ask questions of the people you're working with for higher powers. It's humbling, but it's very powerful.
Yeah, definitely. All right, Tony, before we end this podcast, are there any last wise words you want to share with the audience?
I guess there's a quote from, I've forgotten his name is, but he said, hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Have you heard that?
No, never heard that.
And it's right to be angry at the things that are wrong with the world, the deforestation, the climate change. But if you stay in your anger, you don't do anything. The second daughter's name is courage. Having courage to stand up and fight those injustices, to right those wrongs. And when I read that, it gave me a picture of, a lot of us think, oh, so-and-so's happy, hope has magically fallen on his shoulders and he's just, got a bright disposition. It doesn't work that way. You make hope happen by your actions. And so the word I would leave with the audience is, if you're depressed about climate or deforestation or whatever it is, don't stay there. Do that one thing that you can do, and then you'll always be able to build on that and do more as you progress. So make hope happen by your actions. That's my statement.
Yeah, wow. Incredible. Tony, thank you so much for your time, and I really hope to stay in touch with you. Keep on doing your only in the big, I would say there's such a big life ahead of you still, so I'm really curious what you're gonna do for the next 30 years.
Thank you. I think I'll start regreening Mars next. No, there's lots to do here. But thank you. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you, Lewis. Thank you.
Bye-bye. All right. So thank you for being here on the Food Forest podcast. This was Tony Rinaudo. You can read more about him in the show notes. And Of course, go to foodforestpodcast.com where you can see the show notes, see the other episodes, also learn more about the designs we're doing and about the courses we're offering. So see you next week for the next episode.